Creative Brain Candy by creators for creators.
You're listening to Simply Stogies, a monthly podcast dedicated to the cigar enthusiast. Light up a stogie, sit back and relax while James brings you along on his journey as a new cigar smoker. Simply Stogies will review cigars, discuss topics that cigar aficionados find important, and will probably learn a few things along the way. Now, here's your host of Simply Stogies, James.
Welcome to Simply Stogies. I am your host, James. This week is, as it is every week, it's a special episode. As we're joined this week by two gentlemen in the PCA, the Premium Cigar Association, Josh Habursky. Josh, welcome to the program. This is your first time here.
This is very excited. Thank you for having us on as guests. Really looking forward to the conversation today. As am I.
This will be an interesting show. And then we're going to welcome back to the show third time guest Glynn Loope. Glynn, welcome back.
James, like I said earlier, I'm shocked that you keep records on these types of things. I'm not saying you're stalking, but anyway, I digress.
Might not be the first time I've been accused of stalking somebody. Probably is, but maybe not. So before we get into the conversation about government affairs, and we'll get an update as to where we're at, where we're going, and we'll look back on 2021. I want to invite you guys to all go to OxfordCigarCompany.com and use coupon code Simply Stogies for 15% off your entire purchase. That's right. Coupon code Simply Stogies at checkout. You'll get 15% off anything you purchase, and it's fast shipping. Oxford Cigar Company has a great selection of accessories and the greatest and latest cigars out there. OxfordCigarCompany.com. Coupon code Simply Stogies for 15% off.
Do you like true crime?
Oh my God, Kat, you can't just ask people if they like murder.
But I'm curious.
Well, curiosity killed the cat.
Does that make you Curiosity?
No, I'm Logan.
And I'm Kat. And we're the hosts of the true crime comedy podcast, Spoiler They Die.
One of us tells a story about a serial killer, a survivor, or basically anything morbid and scary. Also, we're Canadian, in case that matters to anyone.
I don't think people listen to podcasts based on people being Canadian or not.
People in our Discord server seem to care.
Oh, sorry about that, eh? But thanks for listening to us panhandle.
I'm Logan, and I approve this message.
All right, so now that all the shilling is done, Joshua, we'll start with you because you're new to the show. Tell everybody, if they're not familiar with what you do at the PCA, let them know what you do at the PCA.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have the fortunate pleasure of running our government affairs program at PCA. I started with the association about 3 years ago as our director of federal affairs, and then started working on government affairs in general. Had the great opportunity to work with Glynne now for over a year. I think we're coming up on our anniversary, Glynn, so we'll have to celebrate somehow. But
speaking of stalking,
it's great to do. Glynn does the bulk work on the state side, but we're an all hands on deck organization. We don't really have that. In the past, associations, you would have federal did their thing and state did their thing. Here we're integrated. We have a real good camaraderie and team spirit. If there's things on the federal side where, I'm bogged down and I'm busy, Glynn has a wealth of knowledge, the connections, and we leverage that. And I think on the state side, I have certain relationships with retailers and manufacturers, and we'll do some state advocacy work in assistance of Glynn's programming. So it's been a really good, fun ride. We've had some good, achievements along the way, and I'm sure we'll get into some of that today.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to that because I know that the PCA and you, Josh, you were recognized as one of the top lobbyists for the year this year. I think it was his second year in a row.
Fourth year in a row.
Fourth year in a row. Well, I'm sorry.
Last year it was the Jordan, 3-year three-peat. This was the fourth year. I did grassroots before. That was really kind of where I grew up in government affairs was grassroots organizing. I worked for the Motorcyclist Association, Diabetes Association, and Public Health, and then independent community bankers before going on. So I've had over a decade ride in government affairs, and I've enjoyed it, every minute of it. And I'm fortunate now to be in something that's my passion. I'm a avid cigar smoker, started when I was in college in the Winston Churchill Society, where all us political science students came together, and now really get to live out my passion in such a great organization. Nice.
I was going to ask where you started, so I'm glad you said that. Glynn, let's bring you in. Now, the last time you were on, you were with the CRA, and you actually promised me stories. You said, as soon as I'm done, as my tenure is over with the CRA, I will tell you stories, James. And then I saw you at the PCA, and you're now, you're on the state advocacy side there with the PCA. And I was like, I'm guessing those stories are off the table now. And you're like, yep. Sorry, they sure are. Glynn, welcome back to the show.
I'm in politics, James. I lied to you.
That sounds like it's par for the course. How are you, sir?
Oh, my God. It's always great to start an interview with somebody you know and respect and love like I do you. And say, hey, I lied to you. Or I could start out with saying, it's not you, it's me.
It's me, right. Yeah. I mean, either way, it's the same feeling of dejection and rejection. And yeah, no, it's fine. I'm used to it.
The statute of limitations aren't up on some of those stories yet. And fortunately or not, some of the parties are still alive. So I can only go so far. But
no, I understand.
We can draw some analogies, though. But
he's got to save it for a book that he can sell and make it a New York Times bestseller.
I bet he could too. Like, I'm just waiting I will buy that book. I will absolutely buy that book. Glynn,
there's one story I want to tell so bad, and I can't. But one of these days, my friend.
One of these days. I can't wait. Glynn, what's it like? What's the difference between what you do now at the PCA as opposed to what you did at the CRA? Kind of give the folks a little bit of just what you're up to now.
I get to think more about advocacy. I mean, honest to God, I'm not being flip, and I'm not being, when you're, and I feel blessed by my time with CRA, and truly blessed. And it was as I'm fond of putting it, I've had marriages not last that long. But in this capacity, I truly get to think about advocacy for day in and day out. And, over the course of my dozen years with CRA, we raised about $11.7 million. And when you're raising that kind of money from both a grassroots perspective and within the industry, you've got to spend a tremendous amount of your time focused on begging. And it's just part of the game.
Right.
My boss, dear friend, Scott Pierce, God bless him. He has to think about that type of thing. And we all chip in. It's like what Josh said about advocacy, all hands on deck. We all play our part. And we do what we can to help on that front as well. But, if money is the mother's milk of politics, it's a part of this dialogue that we cannot get around.
Right.
Litigation is expensive. Lobbying is expensive. Participating in the political process is expensive. And so, having a discussion about money and the role that this industry has with advocacy and litigation, the role of money is something that we shouldn't ignore.
No.
And that we should have a bigger public dialogue about. And I wasn't planning on going there today, but since we brought it up, both all the organizations involved with cigar advocacy, all of us, have to be consumed with that subject. And it's just, here we are going into a new year. Maybe it's a good time to have that type of a reality check. Because, it takes millions, and I'm not just throwing that out, it takes millions of dollars to successfully fight these cases in court, which the industry has done. It takes millions to execute an effective advocacy campaign. And as our former PCA President John Anderson puts it, we do more for less than anybody he knows.
Right.
And Josh is fond of putting it. The other advocacy groups notice how we, quote unquote, punch above our weight. It's because we can make some noise. It's easier, if you will, to recruit political allies of the industry based upon the love of cigars, just the blatant love of cigars. Josh did a podcast last night with a sitting member of Congress as the congressman was sitting in his office enjoying a cigar. It's something that I've been blessed to do with numerous members of Congress. We bring them together, and it's so bipartisan. I'll tell you a quick anecdote that the statute of limitations is up on, but it's just, I say this story purely out of, I think it depicts the true state of the politics of the industry. Former Congressman John Klein of Minnesota is a hardcore Tea Party conservative. One night, where we were having a cigar event with members of Congress and staff members, and joining us was Congressman Jesse Jackson Jr. Could not find two more diametrically opposite political characters.
Right.
I mean, and this is such a cool story. And they were standing beside each other, John Klein, Jesse Jr. And Congressman Klein got up there and he said, with a cigar in his hand, and he said, we fight like cats and dogs on that hill every single day. Can't find a thing in the world to agree on. It's a horrible state of affairs. But I know that if I can get together with my friend, Congressman Jesse Jackson Jr., that evening over a cigar, we can find some common ground. And Congressman Jesse Jackson Jr. then said, that makes a cigar an instrument of bipartisanship. And I'll never forget that moment. It was just like, ooh, the silence came over the balcony, and, it proved political opposites can come together for something as politically benign, and should be benign legislatively from a regulatory context, as coming together to enjoy a cigar.
Absolutely.
And protecting that ability for people like you and me or members of Congress. And so anyway, that's my one anecdote I'll share.
That's something that's continuing to this day. We have, in the next 2 days here at the office, we're going to have over 25 members of Congress, men, women, Republicans, Democrats, people from the House, people from the Senate will be here for, our holiday party. Which, I'm reading a book on the Silent Night, the Christmas Truce, and I feel as though we're cultivating people together, bringing people together for a bit of a truce. It is very ugly, the political system right now. But as Glynn correctly pointed out, it is the great equalizer. You have people from all different walks of life that are able to intelligently have some of the tougher conversations. My mom always told me, don't talk politics or religion, but I feel comfortable doing so in a cigar lounge. Unfortunately, in my work, I travel to a lot of cigar lounges, so I talk a lot of politics and religion. So, I'm kind of the traveling preacher at this point in my life. But, I really do, and we're all about creating this experiential atmosphere where people can truly understand the ins and outs of premium cigars, the culture, the camaraderie, and outsiders don't understand it. And we're trying to get people more, congressional staff, but also the general public, and educate them about some of the, unknowns that there are. I mean, it can be intimidating when you first walk into a shop, but once you do that, I've last year and this year, I've gone to over 100 new cigar lounges. That's one of my goals every year, is to visit new stores. And each and every one that I go into is a welcoming atmosphere where I can strike up a conversation. I don't know anywhere else where you can do that. You don't go to the grocery store or Whole Foods down the street or some of the restaurants, and just you can sit there and talk for hours about anything.
Right.
So that's one of the most rewarding things about this role, and having to deal with the intersection of the political system, but also intertwined with that cigar culture.
Right. And I think we have a unique opportunity here with you two, and we definitely want to cover like the money piece later on, and we want to cover, what kind of goes into lobbying. But I want to start with you, Josh. I want to find out like what were some of the gains made this year as we look back on what 2021 was. I mean, it was kind of a weird year. It was the first year. I mean, we're still in the pandemic. That hasn't gone away. How did the pandemic affect what you do? And kind of like, what were some of the really big wins for us?
Yeah, so absolutely. I think, looking back on 2020, that was probably the most challenging year in the association's history, in our careers, having to deal with all the constraints, the restrictions, the closures of shops, the closures of factories, and the response and the rebound. After the dark ages, you had the Renaissance, and this was the Renaissance year. You had a trade show where it was the family gathering. Everybody came back together. For many, it was the first time seeing people that they've known for decades come together under one roof to talk about the industry and the path forward. I think there are many different state advocacy wins that were racked up this year. But one of the things that I'm most proud of, and it's something that Glynn and I are doing the media tours over the next 2 weeks in all the different publications and podcasts and interviews. And I'm going to repeat this time and time again. This year is the first year that I am aware of in the past decade where there was no tax increases that passed a legislature in all 50 states and the federal level. You had that, you had the effects of the court victories, those millions of dollars that Glynn referenced, that we had a era or a year of where new products could come to market, where we had regulatory uncertainty. Everyone knew how to operate. And I think that's why you see this mini boom, as people are calling it. People had more time to, find hobbies. And for many people, cigars was that time where they relaxed on their patio, or if they were working from home, they had a cigar for the first time. And I think, giving all the constraints and all the difficulties of last year, and don't get me wrong, some of them persisted into this year, we had a very successful year from both an association perspective as well as an industry perspective that encapsulates manufacturers, retailers, and consumers.
Well, let's talk about that for a second, because like you said, we are kind of in a mini boom. A lot of folks are calling it the second cigar boom. And typically when you see the kind of growth that this industry has seen over the past, since 2020, I mean, is really when it started to take off. So it's been almost 2 years now where it's just year over year, retailers are making money. You see more cigar manufacturers coming into the business, into the industry. Typically when something like that happens, the federal government, they kind of lick their lips and rub their hands together like, more money for me. And that hasn't happened. Why do you think that is? Because like you said, this is the first year that there were no tax increases across the board. Why do you think that is?
I think they certainly tried. I think that you're on track. They definitely, saw that in many different states, and Glynn can reference that. But federally, Senator Durbin introduced pieces of legislation called the Tobacco Tax Equity Act. He's done that for many Congresses in a row. And this year in the Build Back Better agenda, that was included in the first draft that came out of the Ways and Means Committee. So it was a real threat. They introduced it twice before earlier this year. We opposed it from the onset. PCA took a leadership role as an association in fighting this, saying, we're not going to negotiate. We are against this for premium cigars and pipe tobacco. And, we only need to get to 3 members of the House and 2 senators really to oppose this. And a lot of folks were like, all right, let's focus on the Senate. We wanted to do a 2-track. I don't want to set a precedent where a $3 per cigar or $50 to $60 per box tax passes the House of Representatives.
Right.
So we were able to stave that off. We're continuing to this day to pound the pavement and say this is irresponsible. It's not going to raise the revenue. It affects households making under $400,000 disproportionately, and a litany of talking points against that. You can reference cigaraction.org. You can see them all there and all the letters that we've sent. But it was our most successful single grassroots campaign that the association has run. We facilitated 30,000 messages from consumers to Congress about that.
Nice. Glynn, let's bring you in. 50 states, all 50 didn't pass a cigar tax increase on the cigars. Like that's pretty big.
Well, and many of us thought through the crystal ball of 2019 and 20, a lot of us thought that the cost of the pandemic, the cost of sustaining our economy, the cost of these stimulus packages was going to put added pressure on tax increase proposals at both the state and federal level. Well, what happened? A funny thing happened on the way to the Capitol. Revenues collections were up in every state in the union. Capitals were running and are to this moment running serious surpluses. And it's much, much more challenging to justify a tax increase when your coffers are running a surplus. I mean, here in Virginia, we're talking about $13 billion extra dollars to divvy up in January. And I've also want to add this, and I think it's an important point in the transitioning of cigar politics. And I'll give you a tangible example. The last tax increase to be on the table at the end of last year was Maine. And Maine's become quite a liberal state, if you will, a streak of independence. And they do have a sense of bipartisanship, but for all intents and purposes, it's become a rather liberal state. And once again, there was a tax increase proposal on the table. The retailers in Maine did an amazing job of making it a small business issue, not a tobacco issue. When you put, we hired guns could come in from here comes Glynn from Washington and Virginia. Here comes Josh from Washington. Here comes the retained lobbyist. I say this with all due respect because they did an amazing job on this proposal from the CAA. Well, we are all hired guns, and that's the way we're perceived. It's a very, very different day in the communications about what happened, how these proposals are perceived. When you say, listen, guys, you go away, be quiet. We're going to let the employees do the talking. And in the hearings on that tax increase proposal in Maine, it wasn't the hired guns. It was Susie, who works at the local tobacco shop. It was Jake, who works at the local tobacco shop. Spread out, Bangor, Portland, geographically spread out. This is about me, not about, this is about my job. This is about my ability to take care of my family. When you put it in that context, finally, these issues are becoming less and less, hopefully. I mean, this part of the equation, political calculus doesn't go away, but we're doing a much better job as an industry stating this is about jobs. This is about a shop on your local Main Street. This is about not hurting an industry during the time of pandemic economic recovery. Those issues have nothing to do with public health. And frankly, we should be removed. We should be removed from the debate about public health because as far as I'm concerned, we've put that issue to rest with the filings with the FDA, clearly demonstrating and them acknowledging that we're not a hazard to public health. So if we're not a hazard to public health, we're 0.5% of the total tobacco universe. Why look at us for your tax increases? And studies have, and the industry's gotten much more sophisticated about providing studies to elected officials. And we have one study in Virginia that's now completely a national model that when these tobacco tax increases go into effect, yes, you collect a small mountain of tax on the front end of these proposals after they've been enacted. But what happens in years 2, 3, and 4? They drop off. They subside. The consumer finds cheaper alternatives to buy the exact same product. Those types of analysis are allowing us to sell our message in a way that was totally unavailable to us, 5, 6, 7 years ago. And I credit the retail community for being more sophisticated in how they're playing their political game by putting those employees out there front and center. I'll tell you another quick example. Delaware. When was it, Josh? Last fall, before the Delaware legislature adjourned, a proposal from a Democrat to reduce the taxes on cigars, and that proposal is still alive, being carried over to 2021, the upcoming 22 sessions. It wasn't the hired guns on there begging and pleading for the tobacco tax decrease on cigars. It was the consumers calling in their testimony from cigar shops. Let's think about that for just a second. Consumers calling in their testimony from cigar shops to a Delaware committee hearing on what their local shop means to them. These are amazing anecdotes for a new day in the politics of cigars.
Absolutely. I don't disagree. And we're gonna kind of switch gears a little bit here and talk about the future of what's coming up. We've talked about the wins, but the future in my mind, and this isn't to take anything away from the federal government, because I think all of us here know that the federal government's never going to go away. They're always going to be lurking over the industry, trying to take what's not theirs, what is ours. And so that fight is ongoing. But on the state level, that fight, I think, is in many ways just getting started.
Absolutely.
And I think in that sense, you're right. And I think that, it starts at the federal government and it definitely goes downward to the states. And now, Glynn can attest, we're seeing a lot of issues where the anti-tobacco groups and public health groups are going and saying, well, we can't get anything done at the state level, so let's go after this locality where, we might not be able to win in New York State, but we're going to be able to win in New York City, which cancels out a huge market for people. So we're fighting those local authority bills around, in terms of before we pivot over, I want to mention two of the other major victories that were achieved in the states this last cycle, preserving one of the oldest tax caps in the state of Michigan, the retailers there stepping up and seeing that through in a divided government where there is a progressive Democratic governor, recognizing, again, to Glenn's point, they made it about a small business issue and they were successful in doing so. North Carolina seeing a tax cap put in place for 30 cents, not even 50 cents, 30 cents. So, in the state of North Carolina, people are able to get, consumers are able to get those products at a more affordable rate. So, those are big achievements. I think they play into, the next question that you were mentioning about where the states are moving forward. We're putting together something called Vision 50, which is what our executive director, Scott Pierce, has coined. We're identifying in each state a positive, proactive legislative vehicle that we can do something to improve the state of retailing or the business of retail tobacconists in all 50 states. And that's going to be an ongoing project, one that we're excited to work with the stakeholders in the states, the state associations. If you look at it across the board, there are 3 to 6 retailers in some states that do the lion's share's work, and they're able to get a lot of, achieved. Just here in DC, across the border in Virginia and Maryland, you have great state associations where there is considerable leadership of people that, we're talking less than 10 are able to achieve things. So we might not necessarily have the quantity of people that are advocating. These public health groups can pay millions of dollars and get people out of the woodwork, signing, petitions and all of that. We're still playing in that arena, but the quality of the message and the messenger, we're getting much better at.
Good, because that's really what it boils down to, because as Glynn pointed out, it's not just the states. The states are finding that it's almost as difficult as it is at the federal level to get these laws enacted, to get these tax hikes enacted. And so they're moving it down to the local level. And so how do you get Johnny and Jane cigar smoker involved at the local level? Because the PCA is a retail driven entity. That is your focus. You're focused on the retail side of it and protecting the retailer. And it's not really a consumer. That's more the CRA. But how does the PCA help consumers get involved? Is there a way? Because most of my listeners are cigar smokers or cigar consumers. How do they get involved? How do they help out on a local and state level and get their local B&Ms involved?
Well, as you pointed out, our best vehicle is our grassroots ability to galvanize people, because people are passionate about protecting the ability to enjoy a premium handmade cigar. And the best vehicle we've got to do that is through our cigaraction.org portal. Everybody that's listening to this broadcast, everybody needs to sign up at cigaraction.org. It's simple. Your name, your zip code. From there, we know where you live. Metaphorically speaking, we know where you live. But that gives us a foundation with knowing how many constituents we have in congressional districts at the federal level, state legislatures in your local state capital. We know how far people live from the district offices of their legislators, how easy it can be for them to do constituent outreach. And I'll tell you, elections, as everybody well knows, elections are being decided by razor thin margins these days. And if we get, let's say at the state level, if we get 100, 200, 300 cigar smokers to contact a given legislator about a tax increase proposal, we've made an impact. They'll listen to 300. I can name you legislative elections in this country where a cigar shop was the difference between winning and losing because of 75 votes.
Wow.
In a primary. I mean, the shops are far more politically engaged than they ever have been, but we've got a long way to go at building that critical mass. Josh mentioned, thank God we did put 30,000 messages into Congress through cigaraction.org on the tax increase. But you know what? It should have been 230,000. Mm-hmm. It should have been 330,000. And at the state level, we should be pushing several, let's just say a dozen bills come out of the blue that are bad for us in New York or Illinois or Minnesota next year. We need to be able to put several thousand cigar consumers' emails into legislative mailboxes any given week because of threatening legislation.
And I think, from the PCA perspective, we look at our membership, the retail brick and mortar stores. They are platforms, they are conveners of all of these consumers and the industry at large to get involved in these legislative issues. It is a communications tool. It is a war room where you can galvanize people to get involved in the political process, teach them how to communicate with government effectively. And, we've looked at a lot of the issues that we're facing and identify the interconnectedness of all of it, that, it isn't a retail issue. It isn't a manufacturer issue. It isn't a consumer issue. It is a premium cigar industry issue where we all need to come together. And, we're a lot stronger when we're fighting in unison towards a common goal. And yes, there are going to be differences that come along throughout the course of it, and we'll be able to work through those. But, our strategy, which we take, and Glynn and I are in the midst of this right now, working with our team, is putting together a strategy for the whole year and our priorities and identifying where we think we can have an impact. And each year we get a little bit better in the sophistication of our grassroots, of our membership, of our own knowledge, what works, what doesn't work, improve, listen to feedback. Glynn and I love doing programs such as this because we get to communicate with different audiences, get them connected to cigaraction.org, inform them on the latest of what's happening, but also hear that feedback, both positive and negative. If there's a resource that we're not producing, let us know so that we can get behind that, put some time and effort to get the information to the consumers, the retailers and manufacturers, so that they can be part of this overall apparatus as we move forward.
If someone's listening to the program right now and they're like, I don't know if my local lounge is a PCA member or not, like how do they broach that subject with the lounge owner and say, hey, are you a member of the PCA? And if so, if not, why not? Like, is there something they can go to, somewhere they can go and get that kind of resource to like argue for you guys?
Yeah, I said, our website, our main website, premiumcigars.org, has all of the benefits of PCA membership. The easy identifier is in July if the shop owner is traveling to Las Vegas, the trade show. Yeah. But one of the things that, and again, this is about pragmatic, proactive strategy. Glynn and I are getting out in the field. When we see in the news, new shop opening, a couple months later, we're going to be in there. Hey, how's everything going? How can we help? We've actually have fielded a number of calls with potential shop owners that they aren't physically opened yet, but have the intention of eventually becoming PCA members when their shop is open. So identifying those early on, kind of walking them through the process. And if you're helping people get through the regulatory nightmare of opening a shop, you increase the likelihood that they're going to be a longstanding member and an active member, of the organization itself. So we're identifying new businesses that are potential members. I would say to consumers, it doesn't hurt to ask, saying that they heard us on a broadcast, they think that, they want to get involved. We're happy to also come to lounges and offer, whether it's in person or virtual, updates. We've had several brick and mortar retailers that have taken us up. Last year, Glynn and I did a virtual regional tour of different state associations and updating them on the latest what's going on. But we're happy to get granular and do it for, Bob's Cigar Shop and, the dozen or 2 dozen most loyal customers to give them kind of the update. We have Patrick Anderson, who works on the federal team with me, and Ryan Parada, who works on our government affairs team also. So there's 4 of us. It is very easy for us to give a half-hour update because we've probably given them 100 times. I
was going to say. Yeah, I'm sure these are all questions you've been asked 1,000 times in the last week. So none of this is new to you guys. You guys are, it's old hat for you. But Josh, let me ask you this. Next year, 2022, what do you see federally as like the biggest? Is there anything that you're seeing coming down the pipe? Are you hearing any rumors of what the federal government's looking to do? And I mean, the FDA they're always trying to do something.
There's a couple different things. There's so with the court decision, the FDA this year pulled the docket for the regulatory process on premium cigars. And in doing so, they also commissioned the National Academies of Sciences and Medicine to do a comprehensive study on the health effects and usage of premium cigars. That study is set to be released around the April time period, and that will inform future regulations on premium cigars. So we expect that there are going to be some challenges when that's released, and how we communicate with the FDA to see if there are I presented in front of that committee twice. My boss, Scott Pierce, did. I know some of the other industry stakeholders did, and we've shared information. But this is 15 or so public health professionals that have been hand selected by the FDA to do this study. And we know from some of their past research, they're not necessarily all sympathetic to our cause.
Right.
So, we're preparing for that. Additionally, the Biden administration has announced their intention of banning menthol cigarettes as well as flavored cigars. So we're not necessarily concerned on the cigarette side. That's not in our bailiwick. And
Right.
premium cigars, our definition is, that they are hand rolled, non-machine made, non-flavored, just vegetable gum, water, and whole leaf tobacco.
Right.
However, we recognize, and folks can reference our policy statement on this on cigaraction.org, that we do have retailers that sell flavored cigars or flavored products. And there's a difference. We believe that the lowest threshold for regulation, there should be next to no regulation on premium cigars that meet that strict definition that was enshrined in the courts and enshrined by the FDA in their, the final rule on pre-market review and substantial equivalence.
Right.
We do believe that there should be a pathway and that flavored products should be allowed to be sold in some facet. So we need to see what this final rule or this rule when they release it. There's been no policy making so far. It's been a press release essentially and a series of talking points. So now, once the final policy is released, then we will examine that and see what the actual impact of that on our industry will be and where we need to weigh in and see what we have to do. Those are the two major areas federally. Of course, taxes will come back. Senator Durbin will still continue. If there are legislative vehicles where they can try and insert that, we're going to have to be cognizant of that as well.
Right. What do you honestly think, Josh? Like, I know, and I don't know if anyone's asked you this, probably they have, but what do you think the odds are of Senator Durbin getting that thing passed? Like, he's been trying to do this for years, and it's just, it never seems to come to fruition. It's always like this big specter. Oh no, like Durbin's at it again, but it never happens. Like, what do you think? Is this truly a fight that we've got to worry about, or is it just like roll your eyes and like it's the old man just screaming at the clouds?
This year, it was a real threat. I mean, it could have gone the other way very easily. Senator Durbin's in senior leadership. You have one party control of the White House, both chambers. And, honestly, we had support from the newly formed in November, the Congressional Cigar Caucus, which we can talk a little bit later about. But we had congressional Democrats, moderate Democrats in both the House and Senate that went and said, no, this isn't going to work. My constituents and the small businesses in this sector can't live with these astronomical taxes. It's funny math. I've said that we did 150 congressional meetings on this year. It's funny math. They're saying, and to Glenn's point about the economics of it, they're saying year to year, you slap this big tax on it and they're going to increase and the revenue is going to go up every single year. That's simply not true. This was introduced as a cessation prohibition bill and then conveniently wrapped in a bow for the Build Back Better Act that it was suddenly going to raise this revenue. And I think one of the points that made the most sense to people was, all right, what is it? You can have it either way. It's either going to raise revenue or reduce smoking. You can't have both.
Right. Because it's designed, I mean, it's designed to do one or the other. It's not designed to do both. It's impossible to do both.
Well, my favorite flaw in the whole tax equalization measure that did get through, at least one chamber, is that it was based upon that it would generate $96 billion. $96 billion. Well, guess what? It included products that the FDA has already gone on record as saying they're going to ban them. 96 billion, but it included flavored vape. It included flavored, menthol cigarettes. It included the whole tobacco universe.
Wow.
So, hey, we're telling the public, we're telling the president, we're telling the Congress that we're going to generate 96 billion to help pay for infrastructure or whatever bill they want to put it in. But guess what? we're not putting a dollar figure on the products that we intend to ban. That you've gone on record you intend to ban in that calculation. Absolutely mind-boggling.
So, Glynn, let's shift to you in the state side. What do you see coming up this year as some of the most the more important things to be worried about, to kind of look for the fight on? I think, and to what Josh had said earlier, the flavored cigars. I think I just read something earlier today that somewhere passed it was a town that passed I think it was Denver, passed a cigar. Yeah, they
Denver.
passed a flavor ban, but cigar shops are exempt.
That's right. We helped work on that a little bit with Councilman Paul Cashman's office, who I say that publicly because it's been in the public record that he's been an advocate for exemptions for cigar shops. And that was not an easy lift for the councilman. But it did receive support when it went for the final vote. So that was one. But that story's not over yet. I don't want to get too much in the weeds on it, but the rest of that story hasn't been totally written yet. But in terms of the states, I think, if we say the word tax 1,000 times, it won't be enough, because you've always got to be cognizant of it. You never know where out of the woodwork. I mean, I will never forget. One of the leaders of the Washington state legislature stood up about 5-6 years ago on the floor of their Capitol and said, "My job is not to raise money from tobacco industry for this state. My job is to put them out of business." And you're not going to get around the ideologues, and I say that with all due degree of love and respect, ideologues who just want to blow up the tobacco universe and could absolutely care less what product we're looking down at a table of. Whether it's, I've done this before. I've actually done this before. You put down, the cigarettes, the mass market products, chewing tobacco, and you put down a $450 box of cigars, and they look down and they look at you and say, "We honestly don't care. Treat them all the same." But I want to quickly go back to what you mentioned with Josh about, was it serious? And is it serious? To me, the bellwether moment telling me it was serious was when Big Tobacco went grassroots. Big Tobacco can normally get what they want from leadership, and that's a public statement. I mean, it's just a given fact. Big Tobacco can pull a lot of muscle in Washington, D.C. When Big Tobacco executes a comprehensive grassroots strategy on this tax bill, that's when I said, we've got to be taking this seriously. And we took it as seriously, believe me. Josh, wouldn't you argue we were against it before being against it was cool?
Absolutely. I look back in 2019, I was quoted in Cigar Aficionado about it. I mean, we knew that, this was going to be a major challenge, and we had to kind of muster up everyone and sending talking points around the horn to everybody, letting them know that this is credible. And to that point, I would say what further validates that point, in the latest version that went over, that passed the House, a nicotine tax for e-cigarettes was still included in that bill. So e-cigarettes and vaping products, which are, significantly more of a moneymaker than the premium cigar market, they were included in that tax in the final version of the House bill, and we were not.
Wow.
So, James, I want that to be the quote of the day out of this broadcast. We were against it before being against it was cool.
Absolutely. I'll name the episode.
Let me quick. I want to go back to your question about what to look out for. I think aside from taxes, we need to be very, very cognizant of legislation that allows for local authority to tax, local authority to regulate. And some jurisdictions have taken it a step further to get into regulating the distribution of tobacco products that could affect us. So having these local authority bills, that's passing the buck, and legislatures love to pass the buck. Oh, it's not our problem. It's their problem. It's not you, it's me. And those bills were introduced in the last year, and I think they could come back in Tennessee, Kentucky, Oregon, Missouri. I think we've got some very positive traction thanks to the retail political community, and that's what they are. They've really organized themselves politically in New York. And New York has some very positive bills on a tax cap and a cigar bar bill. And they've got the right sponsors. They've courted the right leadership. They've done their grassroots work. Those bills will be back in January and hold, I think, a great deal of promise. And they're really organizing themselves well in New York. And that was recognized, coupled with Michigan, for how well they're doing it politically by the PCA at the trade show last year. We've got these amazing models out there for other states to learn from. And one of the things Josh and I both are going to put a lot of focus on in the coming year is sharing these models. You know, if a successful tax cap gets signed by a Democratic governor in North Carolina and Michigan, that's a great message to Illinois, New Jersey, and New York. Connecting these models that have been created over the last decade to where getting a cigar bar bill through in Montana or North Dakota could learn from a cigar bar bill in Arkansas and Louisiana. So having that type of information exchange is going to be a cornerstone of our work in the coming year. Tobacco tax reform legislation in Nevada. Some of the legislation too that I think we need to keep an eye out on because they've set horrible national precedents is legislation that would allow employers to test for nicotine as a condition of employment. And that legislation has existed in Indiana and Kentucky. Not exactly two states that I would peg to first come out with that, but literally they were. And all it takes is one bad idea in Indiana to spread to Oregon.
That's for sure.
And so have those types of bills that would allow for local control, employer control over what you do in your off time. And the bills that have done this tried to regulate this, that you could report your fellow employees. You could report your fellow employees, hypothetically, if they saw you in a cigar shop.
That's insane.
What kind of a big brother state? I'm not kidding. You can't make this stuff up. So it's why we've got to be cognizant of what's going on across the board. And Josh and I will shift, and our whole team will shift through what was the count last year? Close to 10,000 pieces of legislation in all 50 states.
We're up to 13 over the full year.
You know, so you take the 10 to 13,000 after you carve out those that are purely vape and e-cigarette oriented, those that are purely cigarette oriented, those that are purely smokeless oriented. All right, so we chisel it down to about 1,000. I think I'm pretty close to these numbers, Josh, but feel free to correct me. We chisel that down to about 2,500 bills that we really got to look at. And then you take those 2,500 bills and say, these are really serious. And you end up, posting 50 bills on our website that the cigar public needs to be much, much more concerned about than others. But we start with that 10 to 13,000 number. And now we're in the pre-filing period in the states. We're going to know a lot about what we're dealing with over the next, 60 days or so. And we're going to rely on broadcasts like this to help spread the word on bills that are both opportunities and threats. So I hope that kind of paints the picture of where we're going in the states. And feel free to fill in the blanks. Real quick, I want to make sure folks do know at this stage that the bill that would allow Florida local governments to regulate smoking is alive. It's gotten through one committee. It may or may not have promise, but one day it will have more traction than not. So we have to take it seriously every single year. So people can go to cigaraction.org to go ahead and voice their concerns in opposition to that piece of Florida legislation today. So with that, I will shut up and take more questions.
For sure. Like I will make sure that is in the show notes, cigaraction.org. Everyone go there right now and sign up. I mean, this is your way as a consumer to be more involved and to make sure that your voice is heard, because guys like Glynn and Josh, that's what they're here for. They're here to make sure that your voice is heard. And I know we're quickly running out of time here, and I know you guys are both very busy guys, so I don't want to keep you too long. But Josh and Glynn, I'm sure you can speak to this too, because politics is all about relationships. Politics is all about trying to find common ground, and sometimes that common ground is when both sides are just unhappy. I'd like to know a little bit more about how the lobbying goes, Josh, and kind of what's involved with that, because I know it's a lot of relationships, but I have a tack on I want to put on that question, and that is 30 years ago, Republicans would have been the ones that would have said, let's enact a vice tax. Let's put a vice tax on something, whether it's alcohol or tobacco or whatever. And now, like, it seems to me like things have kind of shifted, and now it's the Democrats who are like, let's tax the ever-loving crap out of this and try to tax it out of existence. And the Republicans are more libertarian now in some instances where they're like, it's kind of, if the people want to do it, let them do it. Like, sure, we can take our pound of flesh, but like, let's just let them do it. So, Josh, can you speak to those points just real quick?
Yeah, absolutely. I think most of the time, lobbying in a nutshell, and I think Hollywood over dramatizes what lobbying actually is. Glynn mentioned sifting through 13,000 bills. That isn't, necessarily the most exciting part of the role.
It's not sexy. No, it's not.
No, it isn't at all. We like the ones where we get to have those public forums and interviewing members of Congress and going to the FDA. That's what a lot of the times we send press releases about. But there's a lot of behind the scenes of sifting through the information, understanding that information, and then us being able to communicate that to our membership and then also to members of Congress and staff. So, I mentioned I've done 150 federal congressional meetings this year. We've done, since I've started, we're around the 750 mark of those educational meetings. And some of it is as simple as, this is what a premium cigar is, and this is not a cigarette. This is what the differences are. Here are the health data, that comes from the NIH, that comes from the FDA about premium cigars. Wow. So, I think most of the job itself is educating people. And on the relationship side, we have champions on both sides of the aisle. We have ardent opponents on both sides of the aisle. Premium cigars are not Republican or Democrat. It really is its own right, and we're trying to build coalitions of unlikely partners where we can get a group of both Republicans and Democrats together. And Glynn mentioned the story about Jesse Jackson Jr. About two and a half years ago, when I was just first getting started with the association, there was a fundraiser for a Republican member of Congress at W. Curtis Draper, John Anderson shop right near the White House. So all Republican staff, probably about 30 Republicans, and we were there on behalf of our political action committee. We're bipartisan. We support, candidates on both sides of the aisle. And a longstanding Democratic member of Congress walks into the event thinking that he was just going to buy cigars at W. Curtis Draper. And, everyone kind of chuckled that he came to this Republican event, and he stayed for 3 hours because it wasn't about, all of the friction. And the very next day he was on Twitter, attacking Republicans. But we left it at the door, and that's kind of encapsulates the beauty of that cigar lounge, where relationships can be built. And pre-COVID, I started a public engagement series where we would have our office basically open, where we would have consumers, retailers, our membership, members of Congress and staff to show movies like Hand Rolled, to have Drew Newman talk about the J.C. Newman factory, for people to sample cigars, to roll cigars, to do pairings and blendings and all of the above. So again, we're very big on the experiential education and teaching people about cigars, and that definitely leads into relationship building across the aisle.
Nice. And that's interesting because we do live in in a time where there's such divisiveness across the board politically. And I kind of do think that politics, for the most part, what you see on Twitter and what you see on C-SPAN and it's all kabuki theater. It's all just to rile up their base. And I wonder, on some level, I'm sure they kind of think I'm doing the good thing. No one's the villain in their own story. Right. But I feel like a lot of it's just theater, and they know in their heart of hearts some of this stuff just isn't going to get past, and they're just trying to get through whatever they can. And it's guys like you and it's guys like Glynn that kind of stop that and get people from the other side to go, I think some of this is okay and some of this isn't. And so I really respect what you guys do a lot, because I couldn't do it. I couldn't. I'm not that guy. I can't be like bring two sides together. I would just be like, you're wrong and you're right, or you're wrong and you're right. Like there's just.
When I set out for my career, I originally wanted to be a political science professor. I wanted to teach politics at the academic level. And, I kind of said, in order to do that, I actually need to know how to do it myself. I didn't want to be one of those professors that, had never done it firsthand. And so that kind of led me down the route of advocacy, more from that communications, grassroots school of thought. And that has continued. I teach at George Washington University also, so I have the best of both worlds. But it's similar to my 20 students that I have at the graduate level. It's teaching this subset of our membership about government, and that's rewarding. Teaching people civics to me is a rewarding venture, and doing it in the lens of premium cigars, which I know and love and enjoy daily. Both Glynn and I think, are outliers when it comes to those FDA statistics about usage. But it's one of those things where not a day goes by where I don't wake up feeling proud. And I know Glynn feels the same way, being proud of what we do for all the people that it affects.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I know Glynn does. You guys are both so passionate about it, and you're passionate about what you do, and you do it on the federal level. I mean, that's your area, that's your wheelhouse, Josh, and Glynn does it on the state level. And so how do you do that? Like, this will be the last question. Like, how do you bring people together on a state level? Because on a state level, I feel like it's probably a little bit harder, because they're more dug into where they're at. They're more dug in with their beliefs. Where on a federal level, they're used to, having that give and take, and they'll rile up their base, but they'll have that give and take. On a state level, it's like, no, this is the way it needs to be, because this is my state and I want it to be like this.
I tell you, it kind of goes back to the previous comment I made about, it's like what Tip O'Neill used to say, all politics is local. And even though things are entrenched in terms of a partisan context, and I can give you some recent examples as a result of the election to dramatize this, but if you've got let me give you a federal example and a state example. When we were pushing for the exemption legislation in Congress, I watched a member of Congress totally sign onto the bill, sight unseen, because one cigar shop, the only cigar shop in that congressional district, personally called him. And that cigar shop said, I have never asked a thing of you. I have never asked you for anything. But this is about the survival of my business.
Wow.
We actually, in the office, it was an Illinois congressman, and we physically put the retailer on the phone in the office in Washington, on the phone with the retailer. And bam, he said, where do I sign? Because of an impassioned plea from a constituent to support a given piece of legislation. At the state level, we've just gone through elections in Virginia and New Jersey. The states will be cranking back up in a political context. When you talk about building the network and having that personal touch, I would argue actually that it's easier at the state level than it is in Washington in many ways, because that single cigar shop, we have state legislative districts where there may be 3 cigar shops in a given state legislative district. That if each cigar shop, and I think this is a decent number, if each cigar shop has a base of customers of 2,000 to 3,000 people, that's a bona fide political constituency that there isn't a special interest group in America wouldn't give their right arm for. If we can galvanize, one cigar shop's base of customers, that is a political constituency at the state level that is enviable by many, many other special interest groups. Now, the dilemma comes in is that heart, lung, and cancer can galvanize thousands of members instantaneously, thousands of members. We've got to do the same. We've been working towards that goal for a long time now, and we're just now, I think, getting that critical mass to where we can say, listen, we help move the needle on that. But I would argue at the state level where, a single shop calls up their local member and says, I got 2,000 customers and we're relying on your vote on this bill. That's a powerful political message. And I've seen it happen through 3 decades of watching capitals in my professional life. And I don't think the lessons changed from, this will be the 35th anniversary of my first session of the Virginia General Assembly.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. I've aged so much more gracefully.
You have.
But
that's why I stalked you, Glynn.
That's more years than I've been on this earth.
Yeah, let's put that in perspective. On Simply Stogies, I'd like to announce my resignation from PCA. No, 35 years. But the tactics, the game, the communications tool, they're more sophisticated today, but the game is the same. Yeah. It's about outreach. It's about touching your member. It's about, and I have said this very publicly at the end of every petition that I've ever put out in the last decade. At the end of every discussion with an elected official, whether you're a cigar shop owner or a consumer, end the discussion with this comment: I'm going to remember what you do on election day.
Yeah.
End every conversation with, I'm going to remember what you do on election day. We say that enough in this country, they're going to listen.
Yes.
Even on something it ought to be as simple as enjoying a cigar.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So if somebody if somebody has a shop and they're listening right now and you're a B&M owner and they want to get a hold of you and say, hey, please, let's just do a virtual government affairs update, or like, how do we get you here in person? Who do they reach out to? What's the contact information for that?
They can reach either one of us, to get a lot of the informational materials, cigaraction.org. It's just Glenn and Joshua at premiumcigars.org, our email addresses. We're happy to set those things up. And, Glenn and I have gotten a good 1-2 punch tag teaming a lot of these different briefings and that. So we got it down to a bit of a science, and, we're happy to do those for any brick and mortar retailers, or consumer groups as well. We know I presented to a group over the Thanksgiving holiday in the Williamsburg, Virginia area at a shop that was just a collection of 30 or 40 consumers. So we're happy to do either or.
Absolutely. I will make sure that that's in the show notes as well. Joshua at premiumcigarassociation.com. Is that right?
Just premiumcigars.org. Joshua.
Premiumcigars.org. There you go. So I'll make sure both of those emails are in there, because I do think it's important to get this into the hands of the consumers and not just the retailers, because like you said, consumers have just as much of pull with their state senators and congressmen as the retailers do. So Josh Habursky, Glynn Loope, gentlemen, thank you so much. I know you're busy. I will let you go. I thank you so much for your time and your knowledge. And I hope to have you back next year, hopefully after April, when everything comes out from that study and we can talk about what the strategy is and what was said. I think that'll be an interesting conversation, Josh.
Absolutely. And we look forward to, if you're ever in the DC area, feel free to stop by for a cigar. We love hosting people here and meeting in person.
You know what? DC, Baltimore, Virginia, that's all on my list of places to go once winter is come and gone. Glynn Loope, Josh Habursky, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, James. Appreciate it a lot.
And join me next time, where I'm not quite sure what I'm talking about, but I promise it'll be Simply Stogies. Stay smoky, friends.
Thank you for listening to Simply Stogies. Please rate and review Simply Stogies on iTunes. You can follow James on his cigar journey on Instagram at Simply Stogies Podcast, all one word, and on Twitter at the Twitter handle at Simply Stogies.